What's up, guys? It's Tony with Joe the Girl. Today we're going to flush the coolant system on the soon-to-be daily driver. And the reason why we're going to flush the coolant system is because when coolant becomes old and starts to break down, it can no longer protect the engine or the coolant system from rust or corrosion. It can no longer efficiently cool the engine like it should. So today I'm going to show you a really good method on how to flush the coolant system so your engine can stay cool and perform like it should. So if you're not sure when you need to do the coolant flush on your vehicle, there's a couple of different ways you can figure out when it needs to be done. Normally, you got the manufacturer recommendations, which you can usually find in the manual of your vehicle, or you can look online. The next way you can figure out when you need to do the coolant flush is usually the coolant that you're using in your vehicle also has a recommendation. This one here is an extended life with 150,000 miles or 5 years. But there is another really good way that you can check your coolant and see if it's broke down to where you need to do the flush. Normally, you can buy test strips on Amazon, or you can go to the parts store and get the test strips and just test your coolant. The reason why I'm doing mine is I took off the radiator cap, and I recently just got this vehicle, and so I've never done any work to it. I took off the radiator cap, and it looks like there's a bunch of crud floating around in there. So I need to do this flush and get new coolant in there. For me, most of my vehicles, I like to flush the coolant just every 5 years or every 50,000 miles. I just like staying up on the maintenance of the vehicles because then they can last a very long time and you're not going to have a bunch of problems. So keeping up on the maintenance of any of your vehicles is just a really good idea. So let's go ahead and get into this flush. Okay, to do the coolant flush on this system, the things that we need is some basic hand tools, something to catch your coolant in because we have to drain all the old coolant out. Then you're going to need your coolant. I like to get the concentrate because I'll just get a thing of distilled water and I'll just mix it, and it's actually cheaper going that route. If you already get a pre-mixed, they're charging you a lot more money for water. So I just buy a thing of distilled water and get a thing of concentrated coolant. And you're also going to need the tool that we're going to flush the system with right here. Mighty Vac coolant system flush tool or gun, whatever you want to call it. This thing works some magic. Also, I went ahead and picked up a thermostat. Now, technically, you don't have to replace it, but to do this coolant flush, you have to take the thermostat out. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace it while it's out. You're also going to need a garden hose and an air compressor because you're going to need water and air to flush this system. So first thing we need to do is get this coolant drained out of this vehicle. So if you guys are interested in any of the tools that I'm using in this video today, I will link them in the description. They are Amazon links, so if you're interested, that's where they'll be. Okay, so before we start the coolant flush, make sure the vehicle's been sitting for about a day or so to make sure that the coolant isn't hot and the system isn't pressurized. Now, even though it's been sitting a little while, I still like to be pretty cautious when I'm working on the coolant system because I don't want it to be pressurized when I start working on it or the coolant being extra hot. So just to take a little extra precaution, I take a rag, I'll toss it over the top of the radiator cap, crack this slowly, making sure there's no pressure or any hot fluids coming out of the radiator. And like I said, this one's been sitting a little while, so we're good. Now, if you don't have a radiator cap like this and you have a pressure tank, you do the same thing with the pressure tank. Now, the best way to make sure you're not going to get burnt or any coolant flying out of there is to make sure that you let your vehicle sit for at least a day or so. There's no harm in just letting it cool off and making sure you don't get burnt or having coolant flying all over the place. So just be careful when it comes to that. Now, when you go to drain the coolant on the system, usually there is a drain on either corner of the lower part of the radiator. And if you don't have that, you'll end up taking off the lower radiator hose to drain the coolant. Now, let's see if we can see where this one here, the corner here of the radiator, there's a little drain plug right here. So we're just going to go ahead and take that drain plug out and get the coolant out of this system. So you would think this is something I wouldn't have to say, but when you're doing this, make sure you catch all your coolant and dispose of it properly. Don't just let it out on the ground. It's very toxic to animals and to the environment. So just make sure you catch your coolant and dispose of it properly. So not all vehicles you're going to have to do this. If you have a front-wheel drive car, more than likely you're not going to have to do this. But here I'm just going to loosen up my belt tensioner so I can take this belt off. And the reason why I'm doing this is because my thermostat sits right over top of where my belt pulleys are. And when I take the thermostat out, I don't want to get coolant all over my belt and ruin it. So we're going to go ahead and take the belt off so we don't end up ruining the belt. And now I'm going to go ahead and draw a diagram on how the belt is routed. Some vehicles do have this already on the vehicle, on like the crossbar or maybe the hood, something like that. But on this vehicle, there isn't one, so I'm going to go ahead and draw it so when it's time to put the belt back on there, I have a good idea on how it's routed. Now it's time to locate your thermostat housing so you can remove all the necessary things to remove your thermostat housing so you can take your thermostat out. Now, once you get the thermostat housing off, you just go ahead and take this thermostat out. You do not need to clean the surface on the housing or the engine quite yet. All I'm going to do is bolt this back on there, which that allows me to put the hose back on the housing. So when I flush the engine, I have the hose so I can direct the coolant and the water that I'm flushing out of it into a container and catch all of it. So there's 4 systems you have to flush. You will have the radiator, so you're going to flush the radiator one direction and then back flush it. You're going to do the same thing with the engine. You're going to flush it one direction and then back flush it. Then you're going to have the heater core, same thing with that. You flush it one way and then back flush it. And then you also take out your reservoir, empty all that old coolant out, and then you try to flush that out and clean it out as best as you can. So that ends up cleaning all of your coolant system. So when you go to put the new coolant in, everything is completely fresh and all the old gunk and stuff is out of your coolant system. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go ahead and bolt this thermostat housing up, and then we're going to start flushing the radiator first. So I have the air hooked up to the gun along with my garden hose. I just run 100 psi out of the air compressor. So what I would do, I flip the yellow switch on that allows water to flow through the coolant system, and then I'll hit the air and hold it for about 3 to 5 seconds and let off and let water run through. Hit it for 3 to 5 seconds, let more water run through. And I'll do that about 5 to 10 minutes one direction, and then I'll flop directions and do the same. I also have containers underneath the Jeep to catch all the old water and coolant and all the crud that's coming out of it. I like to try to catch everything I can so there's nothing on the ground that can be toxic to animals or the environment. So just do your best, catch all the old coolant when you're doing this flush. So we're going to do this one direction, and then we're going to flip-flop it and do it the other direction. So here goes. I'm going to turn the water on. Water's flowing. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of air. 1, 2, 3. Lid off. Get a little bit more air. 1, 2, 3. Lid off. Give it a little more air. 1, 2, 3. Lid off. While the water's still running, 1, 2, 3. Lid off. 1, 2, 3. Lid off. 1, 2, 3. Lid off. Now what I'm trying to do is get this so when the water's running through whatever I'm flushing, the water's coming out clear. No floaters, no rust, nothing like that coming out of the water. I want the water to be super clear coming out. So that's the goal here. So that's why I do it for 5 minutes one direction, 5 minutes the other direction, maybe 10 minutes each direction. And then it's usually good by then. And now I'm done doing that direction. Now I'm going to hook it to the lower radiator hose and I'm going to flush it the opposite direction. Okay, so now we're done flushing the radiator. So we flushed it one way for about 5 minutes, flushed it the opposite way for about 5 minutes. And we had clear water coming out of it. There's no junk coming out of it. Now I'm going to go ahead and flush the engine block. So now you can see I have the hose here connected to the upper radiator hose. And that's going to the thermostat housing that I put back on there. And I didn't have the right tool to crimp off this heater core line, so I just put a rag and some vice grips on it. So I'm trying to get everything directed to just flush through the engine versus going to the heater core and the engine, because we're going to flush the heater core next separately. So I'm going to flush the engine one direction for about 5 to 10 minutes, just like I did for the radiator, and then I'm going to go ahead and back flush it. So that's what we're going to do now. I also have pans on the underside of it that's catching all the old coolant and any of the crud that's coming out. Now I ended up flushing this for about 5 minutes this direction, and then I did hook up the tool to the lower radiator hose that was going into the engine and flushed it back the opposite way. Alright, so the next thing we need to do, we went ahead and flushed the radiator and flushed the engine block. Now we're going to go ahead and flush the heater core. If you guys want an in-depth video on flushing the heater core, I do have another one. I will link it on the screen if you want to go check it out. But I'm just going to give you a quick version of flushing the heater core. Then we're going to go over to the reservoir tank there, get that cleaned out, flush it out, and get it back in there and start putting this all back together. So let's go ahead and flush the heater core really quick and get this thing put back together. So if you're flushing the heater core like I just did there, make sure you wrap a rag over the hose that's going into the jug you're flushing the coolant in. That keeps any of the coolant from kicking out of the jug and going all over the place like you just seen there. But you're going to see here, I end up doing that. Now with the radiator, engine block, and heater core completely flushed, it's time to get the coolant reservoir out. We're going to dump out all the old coolant and try to flush the reservoir as best as we can. Okay, now that we've flushed the radiator, engine block, heater core, and the coolant reservoir, it's time to put the reservoir back in there, hook all the hoses up, and don't forget to put your thermostat back in there. Make sure you clean the mating surface on the engine block or wherever the thermostat housing mates to, and then clean the mating surface on the thermostat housing also. And then you can go ahead and put your thermostat back in there and start hooking everything up. And once you're done with that, it's time to go ahead and put coolant in it. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this video, but in the next video, I'm going to show you two really good methods on how to fill your coolant and to keep the air out of the system. So I'll show you what I usually use. Older vehicles, you can use a system like this to put coolant in it. And other vehicles that might have a little more coolant hoses and stuff like that, I like to use a vacuum fill. So if you guys are curious in that video, go ahead and check out the next video. I'll show you how to do that. But if you guys have any questions, leave a comment. I'll get back to you. You guys have a good one.